at all the railroad stops along the way, and they were equipped with wives and children. And he had two castles in Hong Kong alone, one in town in the wintertime, one at the beach, Repulse Bay, summertime. So we got invited to the one in town, and so we went over. This is the place was, the family's name was Yu, E-U. They called their house that they built Houston, which was a takeoff on a British castle by the name of Houston. And it was surrounded by a wall. It had the Chinese warrior from the old days, statues on the top of it. And it had a big gate. An old Indian comes and opens the gate for you. You drive in. It's a multi-storied house. And you walk into the front door, and there's two rows of about a half a dozen, look like, automatic elevators. At the end of the hall, astride a beautiful white stuffed stallion, was a knight in full armor. And again, carrying out the British thing. So you would go in, we get taken up in the elevator, and to the house. The lady of the house greets us, and she had two daughters. Both had graduated from college in the United States, so they spoke good English. And so the captain and the wife, the widow, and the two daughters and this other guy and I went out for the evening. And then but they also then showed us around the house, and it was something else. The dining room was like right out of King Arthur's Knights or somewhere. There was a long table in this big banquet room. They had it was equipped with French petit point chairs all around it. In the end, there's a balcony for the orchestra to play while you ate. And it was just an amazing place. He had various places in the house. He had on display his jade collections, which were fabulous, of course. And most of the house was in British style, but the bedrooms were upstairs were in Chinese style. No, I'm sorry, it was Italian style, with nymphs and things and whatnot on the ceilings. But there was one big room that was Chinese style, but it was really quite a unique place. But in any event, we got invited back a few times. One time we had dinner with some of the local businessmen, top businessmen in Hong Kong, who came in all varieties, in all languages. I got seated next to some guy who didn't speak any English at all. And while you're at dinner, a girl servant stands behind you with the wine and liquor and stuff. And any time it got a little bit low, I got refilled. And there was much toasting. Sketch an eye and have a little drink to that, sip or two. And you toasted everybody, everybody toasted you, you toasted each other's countries. And I was getting where I was trying to substitute tea in there instead of liquor. And but my buddy there didn't speak English, but he caught me every time trying to do that and said, oh. But so that was quite an experience too. And we ran. The family went up to Shanghai to visit with some of Sun Yat-sen's family, which was, you know, the had family in China for centuries, I guess. And so we happened to be up there on a little side cruise. So we went out to dinner with the Hughes again, Captain, myself this time, and Mrs. Hughes and the daughter. And so we had a grand old time. But this is not the usual experience that you would get as a tourist, obviously, going out on some big cruise someplace. So it was a great and fabulous, interesting experience for a country boy. And the captain was a marvelous guy, and a real leader. Lord, we were going through some tough times on the ship. The war was over. Congress and the public were demanding send the boys home. But Congress said, you guys don't go home, you stay there. And but meanwhile, send the boys home. So we were losing all of our experienced people just by the dozens. And so we got down, believe it or not, so low in personnel that we could only go to sea for as long as everybody could stay awake. There's nobody to relieve the watch. And so we just go out for a quick drill and come back in. But then there got to be, people began to grumble a bit, the enlisted guys. And, but why can't I go home? Everybody else is going. And it was getting a little worrisome. And so I mentioned this to the chief engineer, and he talked to the captain. And the captain said, I'll fix that. So he went on the ship-wide announcing system, and he talked to the whole crew. And told them he understood their problem, and but unfortunately we had a job to do. And we expected every man to do it, and he was very sympathetic, but very firm and reasoned in his reason why we were there and what we had to do. And after that, there was not one bit of grumbling on that ship about that. Everybody turned to. In fact, the young guys did some remarkable things when we had problems. These were, we had no rated people. They were mostly just guys practically out of, their first basic training. But they, with old American know-how, I guess, they would take a good corrective step when needed, generally. However, later, when things were really getting bad, and I was now to go home, although as soon as my replacement arrived, one night the power failed. You could hear the ventilation fans going down, and I always knew that was a bad sign. And sure enough, pretty soon a guy comes in, gets me out, and I have to go down. Then the assistant engineer, and supposed to oversee a lot of that stuff. And one of the water tender boys, who was a young guy, was due to go home. He'd been out celebrating, and he went to sleep on the job, and the water boiled dry, or appeared to at least. So the chief quickly shut it down, which was the correct action, because otherwise you'd ruin the whole thing. And but then, in Port Staining, and I'm not going anywhere, we only ran one boiler, so we were now without power. Well, the automatic backup power, diesel units kick in, and then they run out of gas. So they shut down. At this point, we're really in trouble. And about that time, the bridge calls. I answered the phone. He said, we we got an indicator that says we got a fire in the ammunition storage. It's like, good God. And I said, well, we don't have any firefighting equipment up front. You go down and check it out. Don't bother me, I'm busy. And so he did. Unfortunately, it was a false alarm. Indicator tripped somehow, but it was not really a fire, thank God. And but anyhow, by that time, we tried to. There was supposed to be a procedure whereby you could use a hand crank to pump new oil, fuel oil in, start it. But you know, the idea was we had to start another boiler, get it going. But we don't have any steam power left to preheat the fuel and do those things. But so there's a hand crank. Theoretically, would spray in enough fuel you could get it started. But that actually didn't work. It didn't atomize well enough. The fuel just collected in the bottom of the boiler, and when we tried to light it, we had a boiler fire in the casing. And meanwhile, the old chief petty officer was just standing in a corner, just totally useless at this point. He'd never, all his years in the civilian Navy, he'd never had any of these kind of problems. But anyhow, the chief came down too, the chief engineer, and so we abandoned that approach. We went back and examined the first boiler we'd shut down, and we could see just a little bit of water in the bottom of it. And so we consulted with the captain, because we were down, and the choice was we were going to have to call some other major ship over to supply us with power and stuff, which is, as the flagship, we were not about to do something like that if we could get out of it. So, but anyhow, so we went back and we used what little steam was left in the boiler, left over, still there, and a little water. We heated it up and got that boiler going, built just enough steam to get another unit going, and we shut it down. And this worked pretty well, except that boiler that had the fire in it was damaged severely. And so that had to be all rebuilt. And that was due to a home. But the captain allowed us out. I wasn't going anywhere until that boiler got fixed. And so I missed a trip coming home by around the world until that thing got mended. My replacement came aboard. I was never so happy to see anybody in my life at that point.